All right, it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome to our Ask the Expert session with Michele Bartlett. This session will focus on transitional age youth and the foster care system. My name is Crystal Cardenas, and I'm the project coordinator for the Center for Innovation and Resources and the Underserved Populations Project. This training is put on by CIR's UP project with funding from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Victim Services Branch, with funding made possible through the United States Department of Justice Victims of Crime Act. I would like to now introduce Michele Bartlett. Michele Bartlett is an MSW, is a part-time lecturer in the social work and sociology department at the California State University Northridge, where she teaches both micro and macro classes. Along with being a part-time lecturer for CSUN's MSW program, Michele is a student advisor for graduate students and has worked as a field instructor supervising and training interns at Hope of the Valley Rescue Mission and LA Family Housing. In addition, Michelle's child welfare and community mental health experience includes working as a children's social worker for the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services, where she has worked as a child abuse investigator and now works with transitional age youth. Michele works from a trauma-informed lens when working with at-risk youth. So we're gonna get started now, and I'm gonna ask Michele. So hi, Michele, welcome. We're gonna do some questions that have been emailed to us. And as we're doing that, you guys can go ahead and send your questions in the chat box and I'll read them. So I'm gonna start with the first question, Michele, which is, I work with clients of transitional age. Many of them do not feel supported by the system. How is that being resolved so these kids feel the system is actually helping them instead of making them feel hindered?
Okay, let's just jump right in there and let's go with that one. Well, the system, as far as the Los Angeles County, they are on a massive hiring spree to get more social workers, because to effectively work with this population and all the populations that the department works with, we need to lower the caseload. So that's happening, especially with the AB12 unit, so that we can better address the specific needs of these clients, that the TAY population. And they're also, especially with the AB12 specialized unit, they're trained to specifically work with developing transitional living plans and just to get stabilized housing. That seems to be one of the biggest kind of issues with this population when you're working with the department, is to find stable housing for these kids. So that's kind of how, as they transition from being in the kind of 18 and under, a minor population, we're really working to start to address issues quicker with the kids that are getting ready to age out of the system and become that 18 to 21-year-old group.
Okay, so our next question is, how much money and what benefits do foster youth receive through AB 12? There's a few parts, so should we start with that and then I'll do the next part? Or do you want to read it?
Oh, you can, we can just—
I'll read the whole thing and then you can kind of do it together. Okay, so how much money and what benefits do foster youth receive through AB 12? What are the requirements for a youth to be approved for AB 12? What percentage of youth are on AB 12 are dropped from the program?
Okay, so I'll start with, to be part of the AB 12 program, as they're getting ready to age out, they have to continue voluntarily agree to be in the program. They have to have an open case at 18, and then it's a court-ordered voluntary program. They also have to be one of the 5 participation conditions, which is completing school. I'm sorry, I can hear something in the background there. So they have to complete secondary education or a program leading to like an equivalent credential, or they have to be enrolled in an institution which provides secondary education, so a vocational program, a junior college or a college, and then they have to be working 80 hours per month. So it can be a combination of these things, and then also they can be included in the program if they have, if they're somehow incapable to complete any of those first four criteria. So it's completing school, either, or working 80 hours per month, participating in like post-secondary education, or working towards getting a job. So something that can kind of remove the barriers from working full-time. Or the last one is if they have like a medical condition or they're receiving SSI, they can also be part of the program. So that's the credential. They also have to agree to, or the criteria, they also have to agree to live in either some kind of approved housing. So that could be like transitional housing plus foster care, or in supervised independent living program. So they have to agree to be in some form of approved housing through DCFS. And right now, to be in supervised living, independent living, or SILP as it's called, they receive approximately 900, and I believe it's 15, because I know $915 a month. And with that $915 a month, they have to, pay their rent and be responsible for themselves. So to be included in this SILP program, they have to have a SILP assessment, and then the housing where they choose to live needs to be approved by the department. So I think I kind of crossed over and answered those questions. And then as far as, I think the last part of that was what percentage gets kind of asked to leave the program. I don't have a specific percentage because they really aren't, they're just beginning to kind of keep those statistics. It's very rare that a AB12, or what we term non-dependent minor, NMD, will be asked to leave the program. The courts are working very hard to ensure the success of these kids. So maybe if they're not working, or for some reason they're not going to school, we have to figure out what barriers are stopping them from doing that. So the court won't just close the case. They're going to want to know what everybody involved is doing to make sure that those barriers are removed for that TAY, or non-minor dependent.
So the next question we had emailed in was, with all the new healthcare changes or potential changes, has the covered to 26 already been cut or modified, or have there been no changes yet?
Okay, there haven't been any changes with the covered to 26. Foster kids or children that have been in the kind of foster care system, they qualify until they're 26, and then at 26, and again, they can qualify like most youth who are under 25, if their parents have health insurance, if they're going to school, they can get health insurance through that avenue. But for the most part, foster children, former foster youth, are covered until they're 26. And once they get 26, then there's different ways you can look at if they qualify for Medi-Cal. Most TAY youth under 26 qualify for Medi-Cal just purely based on income. If you're looking, if they don't have that kind of child protective service involvement, the majority of TAY youth will qualify for Medi-Cal just purely due to income levels. So there's no changes yet. We keep our fingers crossed that there will be no changes for that, because it's so important for these TAY to have access to health insurance and mental health care and things like that.
Okay, and then kind of on that, can you touch on any new changes with laws that you know of?
One of the kind of new changes with law is with the Supervised Independent Living Program, or SILP. Kids now can go back and live with their parents. So in the Supervised Independent Living Program, you weren't able to go back to your biological parents. And now the rules or the laws have been changed that the kids can go back, and we can come in and approve and look at if the parent's home meets the qualifications needed. So that's still a SILP assessment, it's still a home inspection. And one of the main kind of laws that with this new silk process is that the parents cannot be the receiver of the check. They cannot be the payee. The money still goes to the non-minor dependent or AB-12 K youth. And that's the biggest one that's changed so far, giving access, more access to housing options for our youth.
Okay, so then the next question that was emailed in was, how are we supporting our LGBT youth?
It's kind of a tough one because as far as the DCFS, we're really depending on the community resources for that. Social workers are trained and there's programs within the department, but we really tend to kind of refer out to, for instance, in Los Angeles, the LA LGBT Center, because they have specific housing for those populations. One of the biggest kind of is for now our transgender youth, finding homes and safety for our transgender youth, which we, again, are looking at. One of our biggest across the board kind of barriers is housing for this population, because there's just not sufficient housing. And some of these TAY youth don't have family connections or connections to find, rent a room or find different places to go to. And the LGBT population falls right under that as far as housing and services. So we really have to look specifically to the populations that we're dealing with and be connected to the community resources. And that's part of the AB-12 social workers' job, is to connect youth to the services so that they can become more independent. Because as you know, 18, they get to make up their own mind. We don't have as much supervision over them because they can easily refuse to, get the mental health services they need or get the substance abuse services that they need. And so it's this population, 18 to 21, or the AB-12 population, that we have to be very motivating and encouraging to get them to agree to the services, because they do have a lot of distrust, as we kind of spoke about with the prior question, distrust for the department and for the system. So it's really just making those connections with the clients that we work with and knowing what resources are out there for them.
Okay, what is the best way to help TAY who you suspect are using drugs or alcohol? Really, when you build the relationships with the TAY youth, because they come over to the specialized unit, which is the AB-12 unit, right around their 18th birthday. So again, we're always looking at how we're building our relationship with these kids so that they do trust us. And so if we suspect there's drug use and any substance abuse, we do make referrals. It's not unheard of to help transport the TAY youth to the services that they need. But again, it's this area where they fall in, where they know that they can, say, I'm not going to these services, I'm not going to inpatient services or things like that. So it's really connecting them and guiding them, and then kind of using your social work skills to let them know, the benefits of getting clean and sober. So it's just that working relationship. There are substance abuse navigators and substance abuse resources that we can connect them with. And it's just kind of making that connection for them and really supporting them in getting off the substances they're using. So again, back to, the services that are out there for this population and navigating them towards those services. Are there resources available for TAY to help teach basic life skills?
Yes, absolutely. Within the department, we connect our TAY youth to mentors that kind of mentor them through the different skills, like for instance, banking, Most of the kids already know how to use public transportation. A big one for the mentoring is getting them financial aid in their scholarships and different things like that if they are going to school. Us mentoring them through just the amount of paperwork that needs to be done for that. We also have, there's also outside agencies that we connect them with for, it's more at this age, more of a mentoring relationship to get the skills that they need. If the youth decide to go into transitional housing plus foster care, they have their own program where it's a weekly program where their caseworker or the social worker that works with the transitional housing comes in and teaches them the skills that they need to know to become independent. And again, money management is probably one of the biggest kind of lessons that these kids need to learn. Because if you think about it, if they've been in foster care for a long time, they really haven't had that kind of day-to-day basis of watching somebody taking care of daily living skills. And so there's many different resources to connect them up. Also is the social worker. We are mentoring that behavior. The Department of Children and Family Service social workers see these clients once a month. So when you think about it, that's not a lot of time to be teaching them skills. So that's why we make sure to connect them with the services that are out there in the community. Also, as youth are getting ready to kind of age out or turn 18, they have been connected to different skills programs. It's easier when they're under 18 because it's easier to mandate and get the kids to do it. So they started about 14 or 15 with independent living skills programs. But again, it's just connecting them to mentors who can help them to just navigate all those things that happen as you become more independent.
What do you think are the major gaps in services for TAY?
The major gaps are finding safe housing. So housing is one of the major gaps when we need to connect kids to housing, and then mental health services. Because TAY youth can decline mental health services, they usually feel so jaded after having the therapists kind of come in and out of their lives when they're under 18. It's building that trust again so that the clients will feel comfortable going to a therapist or a counselor. So mental health, connecting them to mental health services, big. And then housing, because there's just not enough housing for this group of kids. So if they can't find their own housing, which is the SILP program, and they don't want to go back into, like, let's say transitional housing plus foster care, then they're kind of out on the streets at that point. And then we just really have to work to find them stable housing. But they'll be, sometimes they'll bounce from different shelters and things like that. And so it's just always trying to get a connection for safe and stable housing. Because as you know, if you don't have that stable housing, many times the TAY can't find jobs, they can't, go to school, and things like that. So it's a big picture item if they're not in stable housing. Okay. So those would be the biggest barriers there, housing and mental health.
So we got, I'm going to ask you now one from our chat, which is, okay. We are a victim services department. What are some procedures, laws, rights we should know when it comes to foster youth who are possibly victims of sexual assault or domestic violence?
When we're talking about the TAY youth, the 18 to 21, if there's, if you feel like if you're assessing for sexual abuse or domestic violence, because they are adults, you have to stick within the reporting laws. Again, they have to want help and ask for help. You can report it to, if you have the informed consent signed, the person that's working with the child that's outside of DCFS. they can speak to the youth social worker. But again, at 18 to 21, you have to have all of those consent form signs before either the DCFS social worker can speak to you, or you can really speak to the social worker. But it's, again, assessing, it's guiding the 18 to 21-year-old. Obviously, if they're under 18, you're then talking about mandated reporting and making reports. But many times with, like, for instance, like with domestic violence, it's similar to, if you're trained working with adults, if they don't want help, you can't force that help on them. So there's no really policy or law for that age. They still fall under the, like, adult reporting laws and things like that. But if you're thinking that either sexual abuse or sexual assault's going on, it's working with the client to make the reports that they need to make, going into the hospital for sexual assault examinations, and going to the police department or law enforcement. So it's really, there's this like little area for these 18-year-olds who are considered adults, but as we know, developmentally, they're really not adults, and really in the right frame of mind to, or where their brain development is to kind of make these reports themselves. So it's just really encouraging and supporting the youth that we work with for their safety and for their crisis, kind of crisis management. So as far as laws, they fall under the same laws as adult reporting laws are.
Okay, I'm gonna now ask you one that was emailed in.
Okay.
If you can give us any general tips to help uplift and inspire Tay, especially when talking about their future.
It's number one, it's just showing them that they can trust you and being there. Once you kind of connect with these youth for trust, then we can make the next steps to helping them. And so when they've kind of been through the system or been through numerous foster homes, they don't trust anybody. So it's just using those skills to build trust and rapport, knowing that when they are resistant, that it's their defense mechanism. It's them putting their shield up. So as hard as anybody in this field works, and as frustrated as any of us can get when they're not kind of following what we want them to do, we just have to step back and realize that resistance and that distrust, that's where their defense mechanisms come in. So address that. And then know that when they are resisting, it's not necessarily, it's not about us. It's not specific to us. So you kind of take that personal part out of it, which I think many of us can kind of be like, oh, they don't want my help. They don't, kind of care what it is that I'm doing, because ultimately we have to just always refocus back on them. But most of these kids just want to know that somebody is listening. And so we have to take a lot of time to just sit and listen to what they need, and know that part of that resistance, again, is just their safety mechanism. And then as far as, inspiring them, again, that's just making sure that you're there for them, and when we say we're going to do something, we need to follow through. And I know wherever we are in our kind of, whether social work career or our helping profession, we're all very pressed for time, and that makes it hard sometimes on a personal level to work with youth. And we just have to kind of know to step back and say, these kids need a lot of time, and they need a lot of energy, and we just have to be there for them. But as I know, the caseloads kind of expand greatly, and it's just about, on our side is helping professions, how we're going to do that time management, so that we can effectively work with these youth. But again, it's just listening and patience, so that we can build trust and rapport with them, with these kids.
Thank you. So a question that was chatted in is, how can barriers of working with youth with disabilities?
You know what? Maybe one was the double. Maybe one was the double.
Sorry about that.
I'm like, okay. Crystal's like channeling questions.
So let me start over. How
Okay.
can the barriers of working with youth with disabilities be removed? Aside from the regional center, there's not much support here in San Diego. A lot of the time, youth cannot get much employment support from regional centers until they're 22 years old. Any additional resources are appreciated.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because it is, if we can connect them, they're usually already connected with regional center. But as the question states, is the regional center doesn't usually kick in until the DCFS case is closed. I think maybe people think the DCFS has more resources for our youth with disabilities. But again, it's connecting them up to maybe more of a group home, or a group home that specifically works with the TAY youth and what their specific disability is. But right now, regional center is probably still the option for connecting kids with the disabilities up to housing, job skills, or job training. I wish I had more to I wish I had that golden ticket to say, call this number and they could help you. But again, the kids with disabilities or regional center clients kind of fall through the cracks between 18 to 21 until regional center is ready to kind of come in and give all the resources that are available to them. And as regional center says, they're still a voluntary agencies. The clients have to accept the services. And so again, it goes back to, how are we going to get our TAY youth, or our TAY, to accept the services? I'm just trying to think of some resources for any of the TAY youth with disabilities that need, a little bit of extra attention. It's really a tough situation. And I would just continue to work with regional center and really advocate for the clients that have disabilities, and advocate that regional center takes on their responsibility for that client as well. Because if DCFS or Child Protective Services and regional center can work together as a unit, the services for these kids are out there. And then DCFS, or the Child Protective Services, I know in LA County, can work with regional center to make sure that the funding source is there.
Okay, next question. I think we're only gonna have time for maybe 2 more. Now that we're able to approve SILPs in the home of offending parents, will there be services tailored toward these youth to help them adjust to their living environment and maintaining their safety as an adult?
Yes, there is. When you're with the SILP program and kind of those independent living skills, safety is always talked about. Is there going to be specific training or specific resources? It would come in the kind of in the as far as therapy goes, because if the trauma hasn't been resolved with the parents, that would definitely need to be addressed, because things will come up. And again, it's connecting the youth with the services they need, like the mental health service and counseling. When we go into, as far as SILP, there is a SILP inspection done on the house. So the home needs to pass inspection. But since the law has changed that they can go back in with their biological, their parents, that part, there's not really a safety assessment for those parents. It's just purely on the home, and is the home safe? So since the law just kind of came into effect that these kids can SILP with their parents, I think we still have a little bit of time to see how this is going to play itself out. Because as we know, for the most part, kids will always try and get back with their families. They always want to go back and be with their parents for the most part, not always, I shouldn't say that. So in one way, this is going to help with housing shortage. But I think it does open a whole can of worms, or how is this going to play itself out? So I think we have time. We have to wait a little bit to see what's going to happen. But again, when you're working with TAY, you're always talking about safety, how to keep themselves safe, what red flags will be, what their safety plan should be. So as a helping profession working with TAY that are maybe going back in to live with their parents, this is where like safety plans need to be discussed, or what are you going to do if, and really kind of addressing a safety plan.
Okay, and then last question, just to wrap up, and I think it's a good one to end with, is any advice for coping with the effects of secondary trauma?
Self-care, self-care, self-care. We have to know when to turn our phones off. We can't. Some places, you might have to be on call in a 24/7 kind of thing, but I would certainly question that. But if you have the ability to switch off so that your clients or your agency can't get a hold of you all the time, because that's part of self-care, is knowing when it's time for us to shut off. Obviously, if you're shutting off your phone or you're doing something like that, you have that recorded message, call 911, call the child abuse hotline. So you're not just cutting your kids off, or your agency off. So self-care is important. Finding a good supervisor, whether it's in your agency or maybe if you're getting your license, your clinical hour supervision, to talk about it and process it. Definitely, just the self-care of not skipping your lunch, going for a walk, getting away from your desk and your phone. And when it's your time, whether it's the weekends or however your time falls off, just make sure you're taking care of yourself. Stress is one of the highest, stress links to burnout. And what happens if we have a bunch of burned out social workers or helping professions, the populations that we deal with aren't going to be effectively serviced. So to help with that, we really have to put ourselves first sometimes, because the better we take care of ourselves, the better we can take care of our clients. And I really do live by that. And make sure you spend time, with your family or your loved ones, and you're not talking about work. If you need to go speak to somebody, your own therapist, I'm all for that as well, because sometimes if you can speak to somebody who specifically deals with kind of secondary trauma or vicarious traumatization, they know how to help you. So the better we take care of ourselves, the better we can take care of our clients. And that's what they need. They need us to be on, and they need us to do the best job that we can, to ensure their safety and their independence. So self-care, self-care, self-care.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michele, and thank you for all of your wealth of knowledge. So before we wrap up, I just want to thank you guys for listening in today, and to let you know that we will have an FAQ sheet that's going to be available on our website after this session is over. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye. Thank you.